Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the channel. Today we are starting our new playthrough of a Shadowrun game, and that's the first game in the tactical combat RPG series, which is Shadowrun Returns, and the original campaign is the Dead Man's Switch. So for those who are familiar with the Shadowrun universe, they can skip forward. And for everyone else, I'll just briefly mention what Shadowrun is. It's a very interesting and unique, I'd say, universe in which you play. It originates with pen and paper, so there's a rich lore behind that, and mechanics have been established for quite a while. And on the outset, it looks like, look at this picture. Certainly looks like a cyberpunk setting, and it is. And I love cyberpunk, so that's one of the reasons why I play this game. So you have all the usual setup for cyberpunk. You have computers, you have hackers, you have corporations that are bent on world domination, you have cyberspace, you have augmentation, implants, and so on and so forth. You have guns. So more of the modern / post-apocalyptic settings. But there's more. For Shadowrun, you also, in addition to all the standard cyberpunk fare, you have elves, and you have dwarves, and you have orks, and trolls. And you even have dragons, and of course, for that kind of setting, you have magic. So not only you have assault rifles, but you also have fireballs and things like that. So what's not to like? You basically have 2-in-1: D&D and cyberpunk setting in one universe. I'm really excited to play this game again. I used to play it a long time ago. I think when it was released back in 2013 or something like that. But yeah, it's time to revisit it, I think. I certainly didn't record anything, so let's jump into it and we'll talk a little bit more about what's in the universe, how we're gonna play it in a moment. So let's start a new game. And as you can see, there are two campaigns here right now. The Dead Man's Switch, that's the first one in the series, in the Shadowrun Returns. And the Dragonfall is the next one. So we'll start with the Dead Man's Switch. And that happens to happen in Seattle metroplex, in the, well, not so distant future. Very alternative one. So let's launch the campaign. And okay, so just a quick word on how I'm planning to play it. Usually when I play role-playing games, computer or not, I focus on the lore, so we'll be focusing on the storyline. So combat to me is secondary to that. Don't worry if you're interested in combat, that's not one of the games where you can skip all the combat, even if you wanted to, so there's certainly going to be some, but the primary focus would be to uncover the story, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. Having said that, from the difficulty perspective, I'll go with very hard, because, why not? So let's go with very hard. And here's the screen where we create our character. Alright, so again, like if you played RPGs before, that's not unusual. The way it works, it's a team-based game, generally speaking, but you create your own character that you control. You can control other characters, but you don't create them. You come to them along the way. So in this case, okay, let's go with male. You have some races, as I said. They are actually something that you're probably more familiar with the D&D campaigns, fantasy settings. So you have humans, you have elves, you have dwarves, you have orks, and you have trolls. And for our playthrough, that actually doesn't really matter which one we'll pick. The difference is what you can see there is if you look at the bottom here, they have different stats, and the stats here again, if you played RPGs, you would be familiar with the setup. Even though they are somewhat different from D&D setup, so you have body, you have quickness, you have strength, charisma, intelligence, and willpower. And the differences between races, at least in this game, are basically the maximum caps on the stats, as well as some fairly insignificant initial bonuses. Like, let's see, for humans, you have all max stats to be 9. And you also have +3 karma, which is XP points in this game to start the game. If you are playing as an elf, then you start with +1 to charisma, and you also have higher quickness and charisma caps at 11 and 12, and everything else is the same as for humans. Again, dwarves have +1 willpower, have higher body and willpower, and strength, so that's pretty good too. Orks have +1 to body, have very high maximum body at 14, have high strength at 12. I mean, not surprising really, like as the archetype for orcs, but they have lower charisma and intelligence at 8. And then you have trolls, which is on the more extreme spectrum of that. So you'll start with +1 to body and strength. You have extremely high body cap at 17 and extremely high strength cap at 15, but everything else kind of suffers, except interestingly willpower, so you are not as quick, even though that's not a big deal, but charisma and intelligence are capped at 6. Again, as I said, for the characters we're going to be playing, the caps are likely not to be playing a major role. And we'll talk about the stats in a moment and we'll be creating it. Then you have the archetypes, which is basically classes, even though there's no really classes in this game. Like you have stats, you have skills. These are essentially pre-built characters, well, initial character setups, where they put some decent starting points for the class you want to play. And you have some, again, I will quickly go through that. That's not the goal. That's a whole separate story on how you can build and roleplay a character in the Shadowrun universe. So you have street samurais. That's, again, and I'll put some parallels with the D&D sort of alternatives to that, or equivalents, as more people probably more familiar with that. So that's your typical fighter. So they're good with fighting, they're good with weapons, probably more range, so, but they also could be good with close combat, thrown weapons. They have dodge, so yeah, key attributes body and strength for quickness, so they could be tanks, they could be damage dealers, but that's basically a fighter. You have mages, and again, yeah, mage, basically pretty much exactly the same in Shadowrun as you would have in the D&D campaigns. And interestingly enough, for D&D, if I remember correctly, the primary attribute for mages is intelligence, which is not the case here. Here it's actually willpower for spellcasting. Then you have deckers. Okay, now that's definitely different from a D&D. There's no alternative to that. So deckers are your future hackers that can jack into the magic, so the cyberspace of Shadowrun. And that's governed by intelligence, so that's the primary stat there. Then you have shamans, so that's sort of like a cleric kind of alternative. They are similar to mages, as in they have spells, well, they're called differently, but they are more, or maybe like druid alternative, so cleric / druid alternative, I guess, from D&D. And again, interestingly enough, that's the casting that they do, that's conjuring and summoning. are governed by charisma. Actually, that's again unusual. Usually that would be something else, but here it's charisma. Then again we have a rigger, which again is a very specific class or role if you want for Shadowrun, and these are basically machine users, and in this particular case that would be primarily controlling drones, support drones, attack drones. Could be powerful, but again very fairly specific build. But interestingly enough, again, that's as deckers, that's primary attribute there is intelligence. And then you have physical adepts. Again, there are similar classes in D&D. So if you ever played, you know, monk kind of class, quite often unarmed, close combat. Low to no armor, some kind of casting, but sort of more the buff side, not the fireball variety. So that's similar to that, the physical adepts. And you can go with your own, because as I said, these archetypes is basically just a distribution of points what you have in your skills and attributes. You are not limited, well, you're only limited to a number of points that you can distribute. There's nothing specific to any particular archetype, so it's not a class per se. So we'll go with the custom, because it allows you to distribute your points more flexibly. And let's quickly pick up our character. So the slightly pasty here, we'll go with... Yeah, because we're gonna be a somewhat more intelligent character. We're not going with the huge punk style mohawks. Yeah, that looks good. No beard. Yeah, that's good. Horns. I think horns are only applicable to trolls, so no horns here. And yeah, you can pick the portrait here, but it's very limited selection, and none of them actually looks like the character we have down there. So we'll go with this one, the dark setup. Alright, and now let's talk quickly about karma. So karma is the XP points in Shadowrun game, and it's quite different from the XPs you would see in many other RPG games, where you have them in the tens, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions. Karma in this game is very scarce. So you see we start with 37 points that we can distribute in our skill tree. And I think the whole game, if I remember correctly, is about 200 karma points, give or take. That's the whole XP points that you can, and at the end of the game, have in your skill tree. So karma is fairly scarce, and the way how you grow in a particular attribute, so you see it goes from 1 to, well, up to 17 potentially, like let's say in body, and every point that you take extra is taking exactly the number what you see here. So it actually, each extra point costs you more. So just grabbing the first one is cheap, like this one is just cost you 1 point, the next one costs 2, the next one costs 3, and so on and so forth. So if somehow you are building the, well, that's presumably troll character, and you want to hit 17 in body, that means going from 16 to 17, so just 1 extra point in body will cost you 17 karma points. That's a lot, because for 17 points you can get a lot of the lower level skills. But that's how it works. Which also means that basically you cannot spread your points too thin. You can't really be, I mean, you can be a jack of all trades, but you definitely will be master of none, and that's not really great setups in this game. Because you can't max or even have to a decent level multiple subtrees here. You really have to focus. I mean, while you can do hybrids, you have to be careful about how you do that, and don't waste your karma points on stuff that actually is not going to be viable. It's not going to be help you much, because you won't be able to level it enough. So, with that, let's talk about the characters what we are going to be playing here. Alright, so I already mentioned there are several archetypes, and again, we don't need to go with them, but the idea is like, okay, who are we going to be playing here, or role-playing here? And in this particular game, I'm going with Decker as a primary sort of role, if you want. And the reason for that is, hey, I mean, well, we are playing is essentially cyberpunk universe. You have to be one of these characters who are decking or hacking or doing something fun like that. But there are other reasons, particularly for Dead Man's Switch campaign. You basically, when you play, even though you have people in your party, all the skills in the dialogues, skill checks, as well as, I believe, decking into the cyberspace, have to be done by your character. So if you have, even if you have somebody in your party with high skill in anything, as far as skill checks are concerned, that's not going to work. It's only your character who will have to pass the skill checks or not. And apparently there are quite a few of them in the kind of the game is, from the story perspective, is pulling you towards playing as a decker. Again, not surprising again, really, for a setting. So that's what we're gonna do. So we are gonna be doing a decker as a main role. But okay, so what else we're gonna have here? As I said, I want to focus on the story. So I like to do that, and that means in this case I want to play as what is known in the lore as a face. So basically a character with high charisma, which again makes sense from the role-playing perspective. If you are leading a team, you're a leader, you want to be somebody who is charismatic. I mean, that's usually how leadership works. So we want to be high in decking. We want to have high charisma. So that's the two main things that we'll be focusing on to the extent we can. But there's one other thing that we'll basically have to do in a way. And unlike some other role-playing games, you cannot avoid combat here completely, or much, if anything at all, if you think about that. So that means there's going to be combat. We won't be able to talk our way through most of the encounters here, unlike some other games. So what does that mean from our character perspective? While decking is cool and whatnot, from the combat perspective, at least in the Dead Man's Switch campaign, it's not really that helpful. High charisma actually can be helpful if we would be going a shaman route, because as you, well, I mentioned this, the shaman is ruled by high charisma, so that there's kind of synergy there, but that's a very different build. Like, I don't want to go there. For the decking, well, we'll need to have high intelligence, which again makes sense from a role-playing perspective. I want to play somebody who is smart and charismatic as a leader of the team, who does some pretty serious stuff here. There is synergy on the intelligence stat with the rigging, so we could be somebody who is controlling drones, and that's not necessarily an easy setup, but it's viable. You can play as a decker slash rigger, which has its pros and cons. It's a cool idea. I'm not really a big fan of kind of like summon characters, so like hence both shaman and rigger is not something I'm overly excited about. Another thing is it's expensive. Buying all the stuff for both decking and rigging requires a lot of currency, and we may or may not have enough for that. So, but another alternative to go here would be with just purely support with the regular firearms. And I think we can do so. So basically the idea for this build is we'll go with the decker as our primary role, and we'll need to do what we need to do in order to build up that. We'll have high charisma for the dialogue options in particular. And on top of that, we round this up to the extent we can. That's kind of like not the afterthought, but it's not going to be a primary focus. We're going to go with just regular weapons, which in this case we go with ranged weapons. So as a hacker or decker, the idea is not to be on the front lines, but we should be able to help our team from range. So as such, we'll go with range combat, and we have 4 different weapon classes that we can go with. The pistols, and they have different attributes as you level them up, different abilities. So pistols, again, like lower damage, have some cool abilities unlocked, but they're shorter range. The ideal range, even though actually it says, I think it's considered to be medium range, but really smaller range, shorter range. SMGs, high on, well, ammo consumption, not necessarily super accurate, and really the thing is, like, do not have really a lot of special abilities, which is kind of a bummer. Shotguns, again, a perennial staple. That's a short range weapon, so that's why I'm not picking it up for this kind of character. Even though we'll actually pick, I think, at least 1 point, because there's a really interesting ability which is a kneecap here, and that does reduce the action points for your enemy by 1, which is pretty could be pretty powerful, and it's very, very cheap. And of course we have the rifles, which is like bread and butter of any, well, modern games, not in medieval settings and fantasy settings. So again, this is a longer range, medium to long range sweet spot for that. Have lots of good abilities and have big magazines, and generally that kind of fits with this character. It's not going to be a primary damage dealer, I assume, but we should be able to get some help from the distance. So let's just distribute our karma points here. So the body, so that's one and single one, and it's very important. So basically every point here, our HP goes up by 10. So the more points we have here, the higher HP we have, and especially playing on very hard, we want our HP here. So we definitely want to get our body up there. I think probably to 4 to begin with, and we'll need to level it up even more. So before we only have 40. I mean, it's good to begin with, but we'll need more than that. Alright, then we have a whole subtree here under quickness, so that's a chance to hit in range combat and a reduction of chance to hit by physical attacks. So the way it goes, so under that we'll have range combat and we have dodge, and under range combat we have individual weapons classes, and you can only get as many points as your kind of upper characteristics allows you. So you can't go 6 in or even 3 in range combat right now because we only have 1 in quickness. So I can demonstrate you. So you see, we only get 1, and more we can't go until we increase the quickness. So actually increasing the range weapon skills is kind of expensive, because you need to, every point you increase there, you need to increase points in range combat and quickness potentially. And quickness and range combat, even without the weapons themselves, is probably more important, because that's your chance to hit, and on the higher difficulty levels you will be missing all the time. So any chance we have to increase our to hit, we should be able to do. We will need to do. So for quickness, we'll have to go to maybe 3, range combat 3, and you see, that's a good thing to get it to 3, because we get additional weapon slot if it's not unlocked, even though in the beginning we probably won't have a second weapon. But that would be a good thing to have. Okay, so we do nothing for pistols and just shotgun, and we do rifle. So already the first point unlocks the first ability. It's aimed shot, increased to hit by 15%. That's good. We do the second one with crit damage percentage visible and burst fire, which we're gonna have on our assault rifles. So let's hold on the 3, which will unlock full auto, because we already spent quite a few karma points. Won't put anything to dodge, certainly not yet, maybe ever, because the idea is we will be behind the front lines, well, to the extent we can. Strength, and strength is something that governs close combat, melee, unarmed, throwing weapons, chance to hit with melee or throwing weapons. We're not going to be using any weapons. We may want to use grenades, but yeah, you know that's one of the characteristics that we're going to sacrifice, because as I said, we can have everything, or even many things, so we completely put in nothing in here. So that's just 1 point in strength, nothing in here. Okay, so intelligence. So here comes our intelligence. That's a primary attribute for decking. So it's a biotech, decking, and drone control. Okay, we don't do drone control or drone combat. So we're not going the rigor route. We're not doing any ESP controls. That's the programs in the matrix. But we'll obviously want to do some decking. So, and we want to be high, well, relatively high intelligence, at least at the end, for the skill checks at the very least. And also intelligence governs your to hit chances in the matrix, and reduce to hit chance. Okay, so we'll start with 3 here. The first point in decking, we can equip our very basic cyber deck. That's the device that we use to get into the matrix there. Alright. And the second one is the decker skill to mark target, which increases the chance to hit enemies by 10%, which is something that we want. Again, on the very hard difficulty, our chance to hit would be not amazing. And we want to have ability to increase it as much as we can. Okay, the third one would be ability to equip the next best, well, the second worst, another way to say it, cyber deck, Renraku Craftwork 1. And there's no really point for us to get it for that skill yet, because, well, we're not going to get it from the beginning, and hopefully we get more points by the time we get there. So we'll keep it at 2 for now, and we'll need to get it up. So now we have 6 more points left, and that's where I kind of deviate from the kind of regular build in a way. I'll go for 2 points in biotech for 3 total points, and generally that's where it's gonna stay. We are not going to be developing biotech any further. It does grant a point to hit point recovered and use medkits. Have some other, yeah, actually there's nothing else here. But the second point here makes our enemy HP visible as a number, which might be important if we want to, well, min-max our shooting and damage dealing. So that's why we are taking this too. It's going to stay here, we're not going to take any more. And another one what we actually might, okay, we also have charisma, which we actually want to build up, and we only have 3 points left. But again, we'll get more points obviously as we start playing, but in the beginning we'll get the 2 points here. And every second point in charisma you will unlock the etiquettes. So let's just go there. And the etiquette is, as you can read here, about knowing how to behave in various social situations. And there are different ones, and there are skill checks for them in different dialogues. And you can get rewards in some of these dialogue branches and so on and so forth. You can avoid combat in some cases. So again, let's roleplay here a bit. And again, we are playing here a highly intelligent character who is happen to be charismatic. So the way I'm planning to build it up is I think I'll go with academic first. That's kind of our background. We'll probably do Shadowrunner next at Charisma 4. And then we're likely to do corporate. I don't expect we will be hitting corporates to begin with, so we probably won't need it in the beginning. The other stuff, I mean, some of them is useful in some kind of money situation. But yeah, you can have everything. Obviously, we'll probably get 3 close to the mid to end game, I'd say. Maybe 4 close to the end game of different etiquettes. I don't know how useful those be by that time. So let's start with academic. It's not a conventional choice, but it's gonna be useful. All right. And again, we have just 1 available karma. And so another thing that we would want to do here in a limited fashion, sort of like a biotech, I will do a very small spirit summoning just to unlock the totem, because there are like some abilities that we can get there for relatively cheap. But right now we don't have it. We only have 1 available karma left, which we can take this one, but realistically there's no point. I don't think it's gonna be helpful in any way. So I don't think we can use just 1 extra point in anything that what we want. Yeah, alright, so, and we can keep some points available, that's okay, we will be able to use them later. And with that, let's confirm our character. We confirm. And how do we name our character? Well, think about that. Cyberspace diver, or decker, or hacker, with high charisma and knows how to use guns. Well, that's gonna be Neo. Pretty much. There are some differences, but hey, Neo it is. And that's where we start in our apartment. It's your apartment, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, it's got 4 walls, a roof, and it isn't on fire. Even the cockroaches have fled in search of better accommodations. Not exactly a runner's dream pad, no it's not. But right now, it's about all you have left. Running the shadows is all about feast or famine. One day you are Nova Hot, working jobs that allow you to eat at 5-star restaurants, the next, well, you are here. This one's famine for the ages. Slagging Fixer hasn't called. The money's run out, and then some. Sinuless and free. Free to starve in the cracks of society run by megacorps who just want your Nguyen. Nguyen is the currency in Shadowrun. Something needs to change, and soon. Alright. And that's where we start. In our apartment, it's 2054, the year, and we've got nowhere to go. We can zoom in, so we can see a little bit more, and that's our apartment. There's not much to it. Yeah, it looks pretty run down, so there are 3 points here that we can interact with. Just quickly, we have our PDA, we have 0 in currency, Nguyen, we have objectives, get job, we have nothing here. That's our karma situation. The skill tree, we can spend some more, getting back to the same place we've been before. Here's our inventory, so we have actually a pistol, and we have, is it SMG? SMG, I think. Okay, not exactly our specialty, but okay. We have an outfit, just a basic one. We have some couple of grenades, we have medkit, and we have dog wagon basic trauma kit. And we have data jack, because we actually took some decking, so that's already an augmentation. And we'll probably talk about the essence cost later. So basically, augmentations are not free. It impacts your essence, which in turn impacts your casting abilities. Which is okay, which we're not going to be doing much casting here. Alright, let's take a look. What do we have here? Bank balance. Enough to cover you for the end of the week. Wow, isn't that exciting? Alright, so that's our notebook. Let's look at a list of contacts. The list is site dried up. Carter Detroit, fixer, no response to messages. Dowd, Reiner dead. Felton Nash, fixer, missing since February. New Larry, Reiner dead. Sam Watts, Reiner, probably in the gutter somewhere. Sangoma, Reiner dead. Halfjack, dealer, retired or dead. The list goes on. All either dead ends or just plain dead. Wow, that is a harsh business. Yeah, that's not looking particularly optimistic. Alright, let's look at our personal calendar, and it's empty. There's nothing to do. So let's put it down, and okay, so we have some vid phone, that's in your objective, but let's check our computer first. Your computer state of the art in 2050, broken since 2051. Alright, so here's our vid call. And here comes Sam Watts. The screen leaps to life, making you squint against the brightness. The face on the screen is laughing. Sam Watts. Hey buddy, hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. He giggles. He's drunk again, or worse. Okay, so we have some options here. Okay, and yeah, we really don't like him. We're wondering where he's at because we saw it on our contact list. We haven't seen him for years. Yeah, he looks zoned, but, well, apparently that's not unusual for him. Let's wonder where he's been, because we haven't heard from him in months. So, where have you been, Sam? I haven't heard from you in months. Another giggle. Oh, don't bother with your side of the conversation. I'm not really here. Just one reason for this vid. Somebody finally geeked me. I'm dead. I probably had it coming. Well, geeked in the Shadowrun parlance means to kill. So, well, yeah, we got a phone call from a dead man. When you're an unsavory character like myself, you tend to associate with other unsavory characters who often partake in unsavory business. Like you, for example. So why am I dead? Who knows? Probably my fault. Oh, you're probably right. I wonder where you are right now. I bet you hit a big payday and you're living high on the hog somewhere. Some of us are born winners and some of us are me. Hey, you remember that in Rakuran when things went to hell and we lost Dowd? Or that makeshift saloon on the docks afterwards? I really had your back that night, didn't I? Dowd, that's a name you haven't heard in a long time. Three years ago, a makeshift bar on the Seattle docks. The night Dowd went down. Alright, and here's our flashback of 3 years ago, but I think I'll make a cut here. So we covered the intro, which was probably redundant for people who already know what Shadowrun is. We created our character, and that's our first combat situation, sort of a tutorial, but we'll get back to that in the next episode. So I'll see you then.